What were we thinking is a question that is sometimes asked when you believe another person has done something that's of extremely poor judgment. In fact, there's a TV show, I think, that was on, What Were You Thinking? Is that the case? You never saw that? I don't know, I never saw it either, but I was told that it was on TV, maybe I'm wrong. So here's an example of one of those situations, okay? A man is entrusted by his supervisor with a laptop computer, which contains vital and confidential information for the operation of the person's company. And while traveling on business, he visits a restroom at a fast food restaurant, leaving the laptop at his table unattended. And when he returns, the computer has vanished. It has clearly been stolen while the man was in the restroom. When the man's supervisor finds out the whole story, the supervisor would be well within his rights to ask the man, "What were you thinking? Why would you leave an important piece of equipment unguarded like that?" The implication of the question is that the man wasn't thinking at all. Now, there is an episode in the Torah portion that has a similar response. For me, what were they thinking? And here's the situation. Our story begins when Moshe, relays to the priest, the family of Aaron, what their roles are and the duties as priest. And for 7 days, they learn and prepare to serve God in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle. And they learn about the different offerings, the clothes that they're going to wear, and so on. And on the 8th day, they were anointed as priests to begin their work. So that should be the end of the story. Not so fast. The Torah then tells us something that it's indescribable. It says, "Now Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, took their fire pan." There's all these fire pans, there's incenses, all the things we know that are associated with a sacrificial cult. So Nadav and Avihu took his fire pan and put fire in it, and laid incense on it. And they offered before the Lord what's called an alien fire, which he had not enjoined upon them. In other words, the two guys brought fire to the altar. They just decided to do it. And a fire came forth from the Lord and consumed them. And they died at very instant from the Lord. In other words, God immediately destroyed them for what they did. On the 8th day, each one made an unwelcomed offering to God and were immediately killed by God. And what were they thinking? What were they thinking? What happened? It's interesting, in Jewish tradition, when the rabbis give you so many answers to a problem, you know they have no idea what the answer is. Okay? So obviously in Jewish tradition, the rabbis are clueless about what happened. So here's some of the possibilities of why Nadav and Avihu were consumed by the fire. Some say they were drunk. Okay? They went inebriated into the offering. Some say they were improvising what they should not have been improvising, because when it comes to the ritual of the temple, the priest had to follow a certain protocol. You don't improvise when God gives you a protocol. Some argue, and I never knew this, but I was looking at all the midrashim, all the rabbinic sources that I could find. One accusation is they went before the god unkempt. In other words, the Talmud suggests that their hair was straggly and their garments were torn. That's an interesting reason. Someone walks in the sanctuary not properly dressed, we zap them. It's the prerogative of God to produce ritual fire. It's not their prerogative. Another explanation was they didn't have children. That's why they were zapped. Others will say the brothers were punished so severely only because they were of such great status. And the list is endless and endless and endless, and one explanation is as good as the other. But there's one explanation that I find quite interesting and compelling. And it reflects on Nadav and Avihu and a character flaw. And what do you think their character flaw was? Arrogance. Shadal, the Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, attributes the brothers' actions to excessive haughtiness and a desire to be honored like their father Aaron. And since they had not been assigned a specific role to perform in the ritual of the temple of the Mishkan at that point, they took it upon themselves in an act of kind of priestly chutzpah to undertake the ritual. Now the Midrash, the rabbinic tradition, rabbinic commentary speaks about other dimensions of their arrogance. Rabbi Levi argues that the two of them set themselves off from their peers, and this gets really crazy. And how did they express their arrogance? And they bragged that no woman was good enough for them to marry. In fact, they intentionally took advantage of women's feelings, raising their expectations and hopes for a serious relationship when they had no intention of marriage. I don't know, where do the rabbis get this stuff? But it's so good. It gets worse. Rabbi Levi claims that they publicly declared, our father's brother is King Moses. Our mother's brother is a prince, Nachshon ben Aminadav. Our father is a high priest, Aaron, and we are both deputy high priests. What woman is good enough for us? Because they arrogantly demeaned others, they were punished. And here's the worst indictment of their example of their arrogance. The rabbis imagine this conversation where they look at the two older men, Moses and Aaron, and they say, soon they'll be gone and we'll be the leaders of the community. They wished Aaron and Moses dead. That's arrogance. Now, the Hebrew word for arrogance is yehirut, which comes from the root meaning to exceed one's limits. To be arrogant is to exceed healthy boundaries in relationship to self and others. In the Musar literature, the ethical literature of Judaism, arrogance and humility are matters of incredible spiritual concern. To be humble is not to become a doormat, but to know how much room you're allowed to take up in this world, how big you're allowed to be, how much you're allowed to shine and to show your talents. On the other hand, there's this term, it's from Kabbalah, it's called tzimtzum, which means contraction. And to be humble is to know how much you need to contract so that others can shine. And the lack of an awareness of the ability to contract is the essence of arrogance. Now, David Brooks, the New York Times columnist and like social commentator said this, defined it really beautifully when he said, humility is freedom from the need to prove you are superior all the time. But egotism is a ravenous hunger in a small space, self-concerned, competitive, distinction-hungry. I love that. Humility is infused with admiration, companionship, and gratitude. Arrogance is swallowing us up. Now, let's not talk about the nebulous, and let's get real. And I'm sure I'm not going to make a lot of people happy what I'm going to say, but okay, it's okay. Let's bring this into this world. What worries me most about President Trump and leaders like him are their arrogance. Some believe that President Trump should be reelected. He's better than Biden. I'm not going to get into that. I'm talking about who our people are who we put it in front of us. And arrogance is not limited to one political party. President Trump's inability to accept that he's ever wrong frightens me. It frightens me. It frightens me that another human being can be in that state. So many of his court cases would never have been initiated if he expressed remorse. If he gave back the secret documents, it would be over. That's not part of his playbook. And his need to belittle everyone else horrifies me. It's arrogance on steroids. And I'm not sure why his behavior is not a turnoff for so many people. Do people get a kick at a public humiliation of others? And he said this week that immigrants who are illegally in the United States are animals and not human. This is indicative of degrading rhetoric that is employed again and again on the campaign trail. It sets such a low standard for civilized behavior. And it sets a bad standard for young people. His arrogance leads to demeaning others. He puts his name on a Bible, but he doesn't grasp that a good Christian cannot be arrogant. In his new Trump Bible, he should take a look in the New Testament and look at the book of James, chapter 4, verse 16. Could someone send that to him tonight? What does it say in the book of James, chapter 4, verse 16? And yes, you can say in the Jewish Chronicle that Rabbi Landi is quoting a New Testament text to make a point. Because as one of my first Bible teachers told me, that the New Testament is a really good Jewish book, which it is. What does it say? James chapter 4, verse 16. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. If you want to quote that from now on, I'm all for it. And I know some of you are worried that I don't know the Hebrew Bible, and so I'm going to quote you an arrogance text from the book of Proverbs to make everyone happy. Chapter 18, verse 12, no one is respected unless he is humble. Arrogant people are on the way to ruin. Is everyone happy now? The lesson of humility is central to Jewish scripture and Christian scripture. How can religious people endorse arrogance? I don't get it. Someone's got to explain it to me. And now while I'm on the subject of arrogance, I want to turn to Benjamin Netanyahu, who has brought the state of Israel into moral bankruptcy. Here's another human being whose arrogance has no limit. He cannot admit his flaws. He will never take responsibilities, such as the fact that the Israeli Defense Force, which he was responsible for, failed to protect the border with Gaza and allowed the October 7th massacre to occur. That's why Netanyahu is hated by so many people. If children are starving in Gaza, which is sinful, is because of the tactics that he endorses. The President of the United States should not have to tell Israel that more food should be brought in. Israel should be taking initiative from day one. The war might be just, Hamas is genocidal, but 6 months into a war, Israelis are asking, is it being properly conducted? This is all about arrogance. And that's certainly the case with the attack on the world's central bank workers. Precautions and protocols were not followed. Read the Israeli newspapers today, which I read. Read the Israeli press. A war led by an arrogant, unethical leader cannot go well. The arrogance is choking us. Or here's another winner. Sarah Netanyahu bemoaned the lack of thanks she and her husband had received for releasing some of the hostages. Quote, "Did you see how many hostages we returned? They didn't even thank us." She also reported to have said this in other similar circumstances, and several hostage families responded on social media saying, "Sorry, I was kidnapped." Let's review the signs of arrogance. Arrogant people are unable to value others, their opinions or contributions. Arrogant people often preach their own ideas and dismiss others even when they know their own ideas are flawed. Arrogant people are not concerned with others. They're the only people who are important. Arrogant people can't grow because they lack the self-criticism necessary for growth. Arrogant people are just horrible to be with because they take all the oxygen out of the room and they suffocate others. Arrogance can be deadly. The story of Nadav and Avihu this year is an opportunity to do a reality check on ourselves. When do we exhibit arrogance? Many of us have our moments. And if so, what should we do about it? Can we contract? Can we experience this tzimtzum, this pulling ourselves in. And let us do a reality check about our leaders. Are they in it only for their own power and ego, or do they really care? Mikhail Gorbachev reflected on his career, and he said something that I want to end with. He says, sometimes it's difficult to accept, to recognize one's own mistakes, but one must do it. I was guilty of overconfidence and arrogance, and I was punished for that. Let's heed his words. Shabbat shalom.